Are you performing leadership or actually leading? I'm Chisom Udeze, and this is Overnight Wisdom, a podcast for leaders who are done pretending. Today's guest doesn't just have identity clarity, she uses it to empower many across the world. Cindy Gallop is a legendary brand innovator. She's the former chairman of BBH New York and is the founder of Make Love Not Porn, a social sex tech venture that continues to be blocked by banks, VCs, and tech platforms for over a decade. This happens not because what she's doing is wrong, but because society is terrified of sex, and Cindy refuses to shapeshift to make them comfortable. Her tagline is, "I like to blow shit up. I'm the Michael Bay of business," and she means it. Cindy and I talk about identity clarity, what it costs to be unapologetically yourself when the entire system wants you to perform, respectability, and denial. We talk about why she created Make Love Not Porn, which is to disrupt rape culture and normalize real human communicative sex in a world where porn is default sex education. We also talk about how Make Love Not Porn empowers people to reclaim sexual agency, to redefine pleasure, and to understand consent. We talk about inclusion, why tokenism fails, and why meritocracy is a myth in a world where inclusion is performative, and rightfully laments the ongoing underinvestment in women-led ventures. From our conversation, you'll hear what meaningful rage, resilience, and refusing to shrink actually look like, and so much more. This conversation is for anyone who's been told to tone it down, to fit in, to not do something they really care about, or to wait their turn. Fair warning, Cindy doesn't hold back. Let's begin. Hi, Cindy. Welcome. Nice to have you here.
Thank you. Thrilled to be here.
Yeah, really excited for this conversation. So I'm just going to jump right in, and
Sure.
I'd love to meet you. How did you become the amazing human badass that you are?
That's a very wide-ranging question. You're going to have to get more specific than that.
On your LinkedIn, you say, "I like to blow shit up." I really like that. Yeah? It's not a subtle way of talking about yourself or thinking about yourself. Where does that come from?
So, for the benefit of our listeners, my LinkedIn bio line and my tagline across social media is, "I like to blow shit up. I am the Michael Bay of business." And where that came from was many years ago. I was talking to some potential consultancy clients. One of the things I do is I work as a business consultant to support myself. And I was talking to them about my specific approach to consulting. So I said to them, I consult very selectively, only for clients and brands who want to change the game in their particular sector. So you come to me for radical, innovative, groundbreaking, transformative. I don't do status quo. And then I lightheartedly, off the cuff, said, "I like to blow shit up. I'm the Michael Bay of business." And everyone in the room laughed. And I left the room and I thought, actually, that is a very good way of expressing what I do. And I've been using that line ever since. But here's the thing. I don't use that line as a bit of fun, a bit of creativity, a bit of whimsy. I use it entirely deliberately because I'm a great believer in be your own filter. When I characterize what I do in that way, it attracts to me the people who want what I do. It repels the ones who don't. And I want to repel the ones who don't because they're a waste of time, effort, and money.
How did your upbringing, if it did, impact who you are today? How you work, how you see the world, how you take a stand?
Sure. So I am half English and half Chinese. So my father was English. My mother was Malaysian Chinese. I was born in the UK, but when I was 6, we moved to Brunei in Borneo, where my father had got a job. And so I grew up in Brunei, grew up traveling around Asia. I came back to the UK for school and university, worked in London for a number of years, worked in Singapore for a couple of years, moved here to New York in the US 27 years ago. And, a couple of things on that. I think, first of all, I consider myself a global citizen. And so my outlook and perspective on everything, life, business, my startups, is always global. I'm building for the world. And then, secondly, growing up in Asia, I encountered a fair amount of racism from both sides. To the English, I wasn't English, to the Chinese, I wasn't Chinese. That happens regularly to those of us who are of mixed race and caught between two cultures, as it were. And, that undoubtedly has been a driver for me of my advocacy for diversity, equity, and inclusion, because having absolutely grown up with that myself, seen, the damaging impacts of that, felt the damaging impacts of that, I feel very strongly about a world where everybody is included and everybody is given equal opportunity.
Thanks for sharing. Really love that. I was just thinking about how your life impacted where you are now and also how you take shape in the world. Because I've been following you on LinkedIn for a little while, and everything you say just kind of has, what's the word? Backbone. Yeah, like you can read it, you can see it. And I find that incredibly empowering. I'm also curious about your career before now. You've had a prolific career as a leader in advertising, and then you did the switch. What is the difference between who you were then and who you are now?
Sure. So, for the benefit of our listeners, my background is 40 years working in brand building, marketing, and advertising, which I always say is very good experience for what I do now as the founder and CEO of Make Love Not Porn, because I've spent 40 years working in the business of getting people to do things that they originally had no intention of doing, which is advertising. But what I would say, Chisom, is I'm occasionally asked in media interviews, so Cindy, what sexism did you encounter coming up through the ranks as a young woman in advertising? And my response is always, a fish does not know what water is. Because when I was a young woman, working in advertising in London in the late 80s, sexism was all around me and I had no idea, because that was just the way things were. And, when I look back on my advertising career now, honestly, my so-called successful advertising career was entirely down to luck. I was incredibly lucky on two fronts. The first is I was incredibly lucky that I was never sexually harassed in a way that ended my career. And I was absolutely sexually harassed, but not in a way that unfortunately has happened to so many women in our industry and every other industry, which is sexual harassment, retaliation, being forced out of the agency, being forced out of the industry. And that's down to pure luck, And the second reason I was incredibly lucky is because I can literally count on the fingers of one hand the number of female bosses that I had in my advertising career, two. So I virtually always worked for men at every ad agency I worked at, but I was lucky enough to work for men who saw my potential before I did, wanted me to succeed, actively championed me, and gave me every opportunity to do so. And that is not the experience of most women in my industry or every other industry. So, yeah, my successful advertising career was down to pure luck.
Do you think that women in leadership are more supportive of women coming after them or men in comparison?
So there are a couple of dynamics at play there that are absolutely because of men. So, you will often hear from women about how unsupportive women in leadership are to them. And by the way, you hear that less and less these days, which is good. Basically, that is the result of what I call Highlander syndrome. There can be only one. When you are a woman who has achieved leadership in a male-dominated industry, which they all are, and you know perfectly well that there is only room for one token woman on the leadership team, on the board, on the project, that is a dynamic that forces you to compete with other women. It's a dynamic that I deplore, but it's a dynamic that is driven entirely by men. So honestly, my feeling is that nobody should blame the woman in that scenario, blame the men around her who put her in that impossible position. And the second observation I would make is, as I said, that happens when there is only one woman in that male-dominated environment. Now, many years ago, a group of academics did a study, which was published in the Harvard Business Review, to answer the question about women on boards, where, as we know, there is a massive paucity of women on boards. And so they set out to answer the question, how many women do you need on a board to make an active, beneficial difference to business results and outcomes? And what this study identified was that one woman on a board is useless. Tokenism is useless because, that one woman on her own cannot make a difference. She has to become like the men around her. She is dominated by the prevailing culture, and that's what she has to bend to. Two women on a board is still not enough. And this study cites there's very much a funny, not funny anecdote of a board where there were two women on this board that was otherwise, full of men. And during a board meeting, one of the women made a very good point. At the end of the meeting, the male chairman of the board thanked the other woman for it because it was so hard to tell apart. But basically, the study identified two women is still not enough to make a difference. What you need is a minimum of 3 women on a board or more. Because when you have 3 or more women on a board, and by extrapolation, on a leadership team, on a project, those women feel safer and more secure, surrounded by more of their own kind. That emboldens them to say what they really think, to go against the prevailing majority. And directors on boards that had 3 or more women, and this was true of both female and male board directors alike, reported better discussions, better quality of decision-making, and better business outcomes. I've said for years, if you want true diversity, equity, and inclusion, bulk buy. Hire groups, not individuals. Make sure you have that critical mass, and you will see better business results.
I mean, Iceland ranks number 1 in gender equality in the world. It ranks number 1 in peace. And 40 years ago, women could not even see themselves represented in companies, in politics, in the boardroom. And now essentially women run the country. So I like to also say I am objectively biased, but I think the world will be significantly better, even just outside of the workplace, when we have more women in leadership. But if you look at the data on women in leadership across the board, it's still pretty bad. It's like there's very little progress that has been made in the past 50 years, for example. So the work remains. And I wanted to ask about why you left advertising to set up Make Love Not Porn. I mean, it couldn't be more different in a way. What was that shift?
Sure. Actually, before I talk about that, Chisom, I'd like to respond to the point you just made about the lack of women in leadership, because there are 2 solutions to that. The first is, so many years ago, I spoke at a conference in Dublin, in Ireland, called InspireFest. And this is a conference that was started by the female editor of Silicon Republic, which was a tech publication there, in direct response to Web Summit, which at the time, happened in Dublin every year and was very white male dominated. So InspireFest was a tech summit where 75% of the speakers were female. All of the speakers were diverse in some form or other. And it was a 2-day summit, and I was one of the final speakers. And I came out on stage at the end of those 2 days, and I said to the audience, all of the challenges that we've been hearing about for the past couple of days that we face as women, all of the obstacles, you would be amazed how quickly those obstacles vanish, how those obstacles melt away like snow when we prove we can make an absolute goddamn fucking shit ton of money. Okay, that's the answer to more women leaders. When we demonstrate that we can make an absolute goddamn fucking shit ton of money, you bet they want to put us in leadership positions. I'm a big believer in communication through demonstration. Don't say it, be it, do it, show it. So that's the first solution. That is aggravatingly dependent on us to do that, in the face of obviously considerable challenges. That second solution is one that men can very easily implement if they want to. So, years ago, a friend of mine who is a man, who at the time, he's since moved on to another company, but at the time, he was the global chief marketing officer of a gigantic, very well-known global company. And he called me up, and by the way, this is before the appalling, current anti-woke movement that's taken hold in so many countries in the world. But he called me up and he went, Cindy, I'm looking for a head of design. This is a fantastic job. And I really want to hire a black woman into this job. Who do you know? So separate from the fact, by the way, that I really object to being treated like an unpaid headhunting operation, I basically, he actually emailed me this request and said, can we do a call? And so I'd had the chance to do some research into how he was going about finding the right person for this job. So when we spoke, I said to him, if you genuinely want to hire a black woman into this job, there are 4 things that you need to do. I said, the first is you need to completely rewrite your job description. Because so I went to your LinkedIn profile and I saw that you had posted the job spec for this job on LinkedIn. And I said to him, you have written up this job to appeal to white men, which is why there are so many white men in the comments under that post, either putting themselves forward or putting other white men forward. I said, you need to rewrite that post to appeal to women. But this was a job that actually had the opportunity to be very culturally interesting, because it was to do with a very interesting cultural area that women absolutely would excel in. And it was so easy just to rewrite what this job entailed in a way that would make women respond to it emotionally. So I said, so first of all, you need to completely rewrite the job description. Secondly, you need to rebrief your headhunters. I said, without even asking you this question, I know that you have briefed your headhunters to find you somebody already doing this role somewhere else, head of design. I went, you don't want to do that, especially not if you want to hire a black woman. You want to brief your headhunters to find the women who are the number 2 to the white men occupying this position everywhere else. Because, I said, women, and especially black women, do not get hired into this position. They don't get promoted. They don't get valued. You want to specifically brief your headhunters to look for the people who are 1 level down or 2 levels down from this position. I said, I can guarantee that when you hire for potential, not proof, they will do a far better job than the white men currently occupying that position who did not have to fight the same battles to get to where they are. I said, thirdly, you need to reconceive your interview process. I said, white men interviewing other white men, whether they do this consciously or unconsciously, actively want to hire those white men. And so when they interview men like them, they are actively looking for reasons to hire them. When white men interview the rest of us, they are actively looking for red flags. They are actively looking for reasons not to hire us. And you find what you look for. So I said you have to completely reconceive your interview process, and you have to directly address that bias to make sure that the process is equal for anybody coming into it. And fourthly, you have to change your working environment. I knew this company. I said, when that black woman walks into your offices to be interviewed for this position, she's going to see a shit ton of white men. And she's going to go, why the fuck would I want this job? because I already know from looking around me exactly what this is going to be like. And, it's very easy to reconfigure your working environment. All you do is you look within your own company at the women and the black women and the black men and the people of color who have not been promoted into positions they deserve, and you promote them. And then at one fell swoop, you change your working environment, and you can actively invite female interviewees, black female interviewees, interviews of color into it, because they will not look around them and see the kind of environment where they have to fight the same battles all over again. So those are the 4 things you need to do if you want to have more women in leadership or more black women in leadership.
Did he end up hiring a black woman in leadership?
Sorry?
Did he end up hiring a black woman in that role?
Do you know, I think he actually left that role to go to another company before that position was filled. So I don't actually know who ended up with it.
I think you make a really good point as well about language, because there's research on research about even sometimes the words we use, like passionate and work hard, play hard, and, give it your all, whatever all of that is, also does not appeal to women. And of course, I think for me, also just looking at who works here. Do I see people of color? Do I see people with disabilities? Not if I don't see any of that, I'm just like, I don't know. As a black woman in the world, of course, I think that's what you go in already managing and mitigating your safety. So thanks for sharing that. And then I do want to talk about Make Love Not Porn, which is a sex tech company that you founded. Can you tell us a little bit about it?
Sure. So I started Make Love Not Porn completely by accident. And by the way, everything in my life and career has always happened by accident. I've never consciously intentionally planned anything. My ex-boss in the advertising world, Sir John Hegarty of BBH, where I spent 16 years, John has this wonderful mantra: do interesting things and interesting things will happen to you. And I'm a great believer in living my life that way. So Make Love Not Porn came about because I date younger men, and 18, 19 years ago now, long before anybody else realized this, I began realizing through my direct personal experience having sex with younger men that when we don't talk openly and honestly about sex in the real world, porn becomes sex education by default in not a good way. So I found myself encountering a number of sexual behavioral memes in bed. I went, whoa, I know where that behavior is coming from. I thought, gosh, if I'm experiencing this, other people must be as well. I didn't know that because 18, 19 years ago, nobody was talking about this. Nobody was writing about it. This was me in isolation as a naturally action-oriented person going, I'm going to do something about this. So 17 years ago next month, by the way, I put up on no money, purely little side venture, a tiny clunky website at makelovenotporn.com that in its original version was kind of a public service announcement. Porn world versus real world. Here's what happens in the porn world. Here's what really happens in the real world. I launched Make Love Not Porn at the TED conference in 2009. I became the only TED speaker to utter the words "come on my face" on the TED stage several times. My talk went viral as a result, and it drove this extraordinary global response to my tiny website that I had never anticipated. Thousands of people wrote to me from all around the world, young and old, male and female, straight and gay, pouring their hearts out, telling me things about their sex lives and their porn watching habits that they had never told anyone before. And I realized I'd uncovered a huge global social issue. And so I felt I had a personal responsibility. I had to take Make Love Not Porn forwards in a way that would make it much more far-reaching, helpful, and effective. And so I turned it into a business designed to do good and make money simultaneously, which, by the way, is what I believe the future of all business should be. So I turned Make Love Not Porn into what we are today, which is the world's first and only user-generated, very importantly, 100% human-curated, social sex video sharing platform. So we're kind of what Facebook would be if it allowed you to openly, healthily, socially, sexually self-express, which it clearly doesn't. The way to think about us is, if porn is the Hollywood blockbuster movie, Make Love Not Porn is the badly needed documentary. We are a unique window onto the funny, messy, loving, wonderful sex we all have in the real world. And what we're doing is we are socializing, normalizing, destigmatizing sex, bringing it out of the shadows into the sunlight, making it easier for everybody to talk about openly. We are promoting consent, communication, good sexual values and behavior. We are literally sex education through real world demonstration.
I really love that. I shared about, this podcast with some of my colleagues, and you're like, well, what does she do? And some of them, they want to look up the website. And I think there's a kind of relief. I think the first time you hear about porn, you're like, oh, I don't know. And then you go on the website and you go, oh, okay, it's human. Yeah, it's not this.
And Chisom, we are not porn. Our name is Make Love, not porn.
Of
Porn
course.
is produced, performative, scripted entertainment.
Yes.
And we are the love we make in the real world. And you're absolutely right. A couple of years ago, a professor at university who teaches sex education and has a podcast, interview on a podcast, she gave all her students access to Make Love Not Porn as part of, learning to be professional sex educators. And she said that what they reported was, she said, they were a bit nervous about what they were going to find when they went on Make Love Not Porn. And she said it was so interesting how they literally said their body language relaxed. They calmed down. They went, oh, this is wonderful. And it is enormously frustrating, Chisom, because, I and my tiny team have fought a battle every single day for the past 17 years, not even to grow Make Love Not Porn, just to keep it alive. Basically because every piece of business infrastructure any other tech startup gets to take for granted, I can't, the small print always says no adult content. And that impacts every single area of my business. I cannot get funded. I can't get banked. Last year, Make Love Not Porn was debanked 3 times in 2 months. Got to be some kind of record. Fortunately, we found a 4th bank who welcomed us. Every tech service I need to use to run a video platform, hosting, encoding, encrypting, the terms of service always say no adult content. My 2 biggest business growth inhibitors are, number one, payments. PayPal won't work with adult content. Stripe won't. Mainstream fintech won't. I have to work with the murky subculture of adult-friendly payments who charge extortionate fees. I pay out 12% of my revenue every month in payment processing fees alone. And my other business growth inhibitor is that we are banned from advertising and promoting Make Love Not Porn anywhere. We cannot advertise on Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, Snapchat, Google, YouTube, Reddit. Look at what's on Reddit. They ban us from advertising. Look at what's on Twitter X. They ban us from advertising there. And it's especially frustrating, she said, because we are banned from doing paid search ads on Google. But every day, all around the world, people search for Make Love Not Porn without knowing that we exist. And what I mean by that is the top organic search terms that send traffic to us are Make Love, Not Porn, Real Sex, Not Porn, Video Sexo Na Porno, Make Love Not Porn, where they don't know there's a company called that. One young man told me that he found us when he Googled porn that is not porn. He was so fed up with everything out there. He wanted something different, didn't know what to search for. Fortunately, when you search porn that is not porn, you find Make Love Not Porn. That is how much the entire world wants what we are. The documentary to porn's Hollywood movie, and knows it needs us. And we can't tell them about us. And, of all the barriers I just cited, the most important one is investment. Because all of those barriers fall when I can write big enough checks. You bet when I can write Google a $500,000, $1 million check for paid search, you bet they'll let us do paid search. So I am constantly looking for people who get the enormous potential of what we're doing and will fund us. Because ultimately, our mission at Make Love Not Porn is to help end rape culture globally. Now, that may sound like a very big mission, but we have 13 years of proof of concept. Because as a unique business, we have an utterly unique capability. We have the power to change people's sexual attitudes and behavior for the better in a way that nothing else can. We help end rape culture by doing something very simple that nobody else anywhere on the internet is doing. We help end rape culture by showing you how wonderful great consensual communicative sex is in the real world. We are showing you the great sex everybody really wants to have. Our social sex videos role model good sexual values and good sexual behavior. And here's the important part. We make all of that aspirational versus what you see in porn and popular culture. One young man wrote to us and said, "Your website makes me want to have sex in a more grown-up, honest, and respectful way." Another man left a comment on a video saying, "This video makes me want to be a better man in the bedroom and in life." We can do that. And if we can find the investors and funding we need, we can do that at scale in a way that will change the world.
Thanks for sharing and thanks for this work. I think at least what is coming up for me is if I can just also share just my experience of visiting the page. You know, I remember I often have conversations with my girlfriends about, you know, sex, people who are satisfied in bed or not. And we always just come down to this. A lot of men never really understood what it is to actually satisfy a woman. Yeah. And because of socialization and the patriarchy, we don't also ask for what we want. Yeah. So this cycle of unsatisfactory performance continues and nothing ever changes. And even worse, a lot of men and also young men coming up think that there's just one way I satisfy every woman. I don't have to try. It is her job to make me feel good, to moan as though if I touch her on the skin, you know, like she's coming. And I always found that quite insane. And I remember in my day before I had sex, this one of my good friends, you know, she said to me, "Chisom, if you ever find yourself," and I'm so thankful, if you ever find yourself in a situation where you're not enjoying it, stop, try to redirect. If nothing changes, stop, say thank you, and leave. Which, of course, like a lot of the girlfriends, you know, a lot of my friends are like, "What? Do you do that?" And she said, "I absolutely do that." And that was such an important messaging for me that the first time I found myself having sex with somebody who was not listening to me, I was like, "Thank you. I'm going to go now."
Yeah. Oh my God. I love that. I love that. Do you know, a young woman wrote to us, this is years ago, soon after we'd launched Make Love Not Porn. And she said she was in Miami and she met this young man in a bar. He worked on a yacht. And he was very good looking, you know, and they hit it off. And so she went back to the yacht with him and they got into bed and he was completely pornified in his approach. And she said to us, she said, I couldn't even be bothered to like try and redirect. You know, so she said, I got up, I put my clothes on, I left. And before I left, I said to him, "There's this website called makelovenotporn.com. You should check it out." And you know, what is so important, Chisom, is that, you know, absolutely designed us to change that. Okay. And it's very frustrating to me that Make Love Not Porn does not get enough credit for how thoughtful and considered and intentional we are. So one of the things that we are doing at Make Love Not Porn is we are building a new vocabulary for real world sex. You know, because we don't talk about sex openly, honestly in the real world, we have no socially acceptable language with which to do that. The language of porn has rushed in to fill that gap. Not good on a number of fronts, but not least because, as you would expect in a male-dominated industry, the language of porn is predominantly male-generated. So the person who coined the term finger blasting didn't have a vagina. Because if you have a vagina, you hear the term finger blasting, you want to cross your legs, and he's like, you know, the person who coined the term getting her ass railed never got his ass railed. Okay, pounding, banging, slamming, wrecking, destroying, all terms created by the people who do not possess the soft internal tissue to which those things are being done. So we are building a completely new vocabulary at Make Love Porn. We tag our videos completely differently to anybody else. And just to give you one example of this, when we were building the platform, I said to my team, I want us to find a term for the female version of blowjob that is as quick, easy, and simple to say. Because cunnilingus doesn't hack it. Oral sex. And I said the reason this is important is because when something is quick, easy, and simple to say, it gets said a lot more, it gets asked for a lot more, and it happens a lot more. So our term for the female version of blowjob is lick job. And our lick job videos are very popular on Make Love Not Porn because this is the real world. As my friend sex nerd Sandra likes to say, if your eyebrows aren't wet, you're not doing it right. And so our lick job videos show you how you really go down on women, and they are very, very popular as a result.
Even just visiting your website and seeing real people making love feels gratifying, human. Like, I'm not cringing. And normally porn, it's so unreal. Like, it takes everything away from it, And I think your websites and it's your work, your platform. And I don't think enough people in Europe know about this. At least I didn't until I started following you on LinkedIn. And so one of the things I wanted to ask you was, I found it interesting that you were blocked at all these different angles, but there is an incessant amount of easily accessible porn advertised online. How does that happen?
So I'll tell you what's very frustrating. All those years ago when we were starting Make Love Not Porn, I said to my team, our marketing strategy is one thing and one thing only, but it's a very hard thing to achieve. We want one day to be result number one on page number one of every single Google search for the word porn. Now, we launched Make Love Not Porn 13 years ago, okay, and that was back in the day when the Google algorithm worked completely differently. Okay, so I think, so I remember, I think it was just a few months after we launched, and a friend of mine who works in the porn industry said, oh my God, Cindy, do you realize Make Love Not Porn is within the first 100 results when you Google porn? Okay, and I went, great. And in fact, I think that the best position we ever got to was something like result 34 on page 3, which is fantastic. Okay. Then, all those years ago, Google did something with their algorithm, and we just fell out of the search results. Chisom, you should be aware, because a lot of people aren't, that the porn industry is dominated by one massive monopoly, which should not be allowed to exist in any other industry, but no one wants to bring antitrust legislation to porn. A company that used to be called MindGeek, rebranded a couple of years ago to be called ALO, owns pretty much everything. ALO owns Pornhub, YouPorn, RedTube, Brazzers, Sex.com, etc., etc. And when you have a monopoly and you have that much cash, you bet you can game the algorithm. And by the way, that's what a lot of the sites that do come up are doing. So anyway, the year we fell out of the results, I was at TED, and a friend of mine introduced me to a gentleman called Matt Cutts, who at the time was the head of web spam at Google. And he completely got Make Love Not Porn. And I said to him, I'm trying to do the complete opposite of what you're charged with doing. I'm trying to come up in the results. And he said, let me have a word with my team. And I went, oh my God, will you do that? He went, yeah. He said, we'd much rather send people to you than all those horrible porn sites. So a couple of weeks later, I Googled porn as I did regularly back in the day. And we were back in the results, 3 or 4 pages in. And I emailed Matt and went, oh my God, did you do this? He went, I can neither confirm nor deny. Okay. He said, I just had a word with my team. I said to them, we like this site. So that was wonderful. And also, by the way, showed that if you can find people who get it, they can make the right things happen for you. Now, that was many years ago. And the Google algorithm has gone through many changes since. And we are nowhere when you Google porn, but lots of horrible, horrible, horrible sites are. And what is very frustrating too, Chisom, is, and I didn't realize this until last year, but so last year, Davina McCall, who's a big celebrity in the UK, interviewed me on her podcast, Begin Again. And that was fantastic for us. She has enormous reach. That sent a ton of UK traffic to us, including a woman who reached out to me, actually, so they came across you through the Davina McCall podcast. I discovered you're a personal coach. Actually, I'd like to book a coaching session. It went fantastic. So I had a great coaching session with her. And at the end of it, she said to me, by the way, after I heard you on Davina's podcast, I tried to go to Make Love Not Porn and I couldn't find it. And she said, when I search Make Love Not Porn on my phone, you come up, your TED Talk comes up, but the site itself doesn't. And I was gobsmacked. And she showed me her phone, okay? And I said, can you try on your laptop? And the same thing happened. And that was when we both realized she used Sky Wi-Fi. And Sky Wi-Fi has default blocked porn, including Make Love Not Porn. And I discovered Virgin Wi-Fi in the UK does the same thing. You can go into the settings and change it, but the default setting is that anything that is deemed porn is blocked, and we are not porn. So it is incredibly frustrating to me that, the world wants what we are desperately. And I'm fighting all these barriers with a business that is designed to help end rape culture. I mean, a demonstration of the enormous potential when I find the investors and funding I need is, so I gave a talk at South by Southwest London last June on how sex education can help end gender violence and bring back love. And in the audience was a Swiss journalist who writes for NZZ, which is Neue Zeitung German title, which is one of the biggest German language publications in Switzerland. And she said, after my talk, I'd love to interview you. I went, great. So she published that interview in July, and we instantly saw a massive spike in traffic signups and revenue. And Switzerland rocketed to be our fourth highest source of traffic after the US, UK, Germany. It knocked Canada out of fourth place. Switzerland is tiny. Canada is huge. That is how much the people of Switzerland wanted to Make Love Not Porn the moment they heard about it. Okay, so any investors listening to this, that is the potential when, with your help and your funding, we can help end rape culture globally and show the world how to make love, not porn.
Thanks for sharing. I'm also thinking about just the many young girls who watch porn and think, oh, this is what I'm supposed to be doing, and it does not set up a healthy or realistic standard or expectation for them. And actually watching people make love manages the expectations and I think dignifies the experience, because then I think a lot of girls, a lot of women understand that I should matter too. I'm not just a vagina to service somebody.
Exactly. Do you know, a woman left a wonderful comment on one of our videos. She said, after watching this video, I feel more empowered and enabled in my own sexual agency. Thank you for this gift. So at Make Love Not Porn, we give women and girls sexual agency. We empower you to know the kind of sex you should be having, the kind of sex you want to be having, and to make sure that is the kind of sex you have.
Absolutely. I'm just thinking about, of course, not everyone is as lucky as me with the friend that I had, because I know I still talk to my girlfriends who are my age and old, and they're just like, no, it's shit, really.
Yeah.
I think because we don't also talk about sex, I grew up in a home where, my mom was very open about talking about everything. So I have a very liberal relationship with talking about topics that might not be normal. But in general, in society, as you know, we don't talk about sex. And the only way people find information is the internet. Yeah. And then they go there. And I think not just for girls, even for young boys, kind of managing their young boys who get mad because she's not going to go out with you. She doesn't want to have sex with you. You do not have a right to her body. She has to say yes. She has to want it too. So I think, I'm so happy to have learned about, your work. I have been telling my friends about it, and I'll keep telling my friends about it, and I will try to pen something amazing for it.
Because also, sorry to jump in, Chisom, but one very important thing to say as well is, I designed Make Love Not Porn to be fully diverse and inclusive, and we are. But in the 13 years we've operated, we've discovered that Make Love Not Porn is especially a revelation to men of all ages. More men send us grateful emails, you appreciate comments than anybody else. Women love us as well, but this is especially interesting because we are something utterly unique that men will find nowhere else on the internet, which is a safe space where men can be and watch other men being open, emotional and vulnerable around sex. You would not believe the number of men who write to us regularly and say, I just watched my first video on Make Love Not Porn and afterwards I cried. I've said for years, I wish society understood the opposite of what it thinks is true. Women enjoy sex just as much as men,
Yes.
and men are just as romantic as women. Yet neither gender is allowed to openly celebrate either of those facts. We would all be so much better off if they were. I picked up a great Twitter exchange a couple of years back between two men. The first man had tweeted, as a joke, obviously, hey guys, got this really weird fetish. I've got this kink where I want to watch porn where people are honest, loving, loyal, decent, and really like each other. Hit me up with your honest links, please. And another man replied and said, there's this website called Make Love Not Porn where you can watch real couples making love. He said, I watched a video where the woman said to her man, I love you, while they're making love. He said, sincerely, I cried when I heard that. We are what men want. You know, we are showcasing the power of love, intimacy, and human connection, and men want that just as much as women. It's just they don't see it showcased during sex anywhere else on the internet.
Yeah, that much I agree. I am curious, Cindy, why do you think there's so much resistance to funding, investing in your work?
Do you know, the answer to that actually is surprisingly simple, Chisom. So my challenge finding investors is, and always has been, that I know that my investors are out there, and there are a lot of them. And there are a lot of them in every single country in the world. They are impossible for me to find by conventional means because they all have one thing in common. Your willingness to fund Make Love Not Porn is entirely a function of your personal sexual journey. It's a function of your personal lens on sex and sexuality that's been shaped by your own experience of it. And I obviously have no way to research and target for that, especially because sex is the area where you cannot tell from the outside what anybody thinks on the inside. The people who look like they would totally get it don't. The people who look like complete prudes do. And so my strategy has to be, I put what I'm doing out there all the time, across all my social channels, you know, talking on podcasts like this and media interviews, because I have to make synaptic connections happen that will attract those people to me. You know, and equally unfortunately, if your personal experience of sex and sexuality was negative, there is no rational business argument that will ever make its way through that. And so I have to find the people who get it. And as I said, that is a really challenging task.
I see that. That makes complete sense. Because you are challenging everything a lot of us know about sex and lovemaking and, agency. Yeah.
Mm.
I wonder, Cindy, you have had one rejection after the other. What propels you? Why do you continue? How do you continue? I guess I know the why, so I know the why. How?
You know, honestly, it's been 17 years as of next month, and I'm exhausted. Two things keep me going. The first is, we hear from people every day how Make Love Not Porn and now Make Love Not Porn Academy, our sex education expansion, has changed people's lives. If I had a venture that was not scaling because it did not have the right product market fit, you bet I'd give up. I have a venture that people desperately want and that I know can change the world at scale, and I see the impact of that every single day. As with any disruptive technology, use cases emerge the founder never dreamt of. I was so moved when we began hearing, as we do regularly, from survivors of rape, sexual assault, sexual abuse. They tell us that Make Love Not Porn helped them reclaim their bodies. We help them feel able to be sexual again post-trauma in a situation where porn is way too triggering. And it's not just people who watch our videos. We have a number of Make Love Not Porn stars who tell us being able to share themselves sexually in a completely safe and trustworthy space has helped them process and heal from sexual trauma. I never thought of that as a usage when I came up with this idea. I'm obviously ecstatic that it is. So, I know the impact we have had and we can have with funding behind us, and that keeps it going. And then the second thing that keeps it going is my biggest motivating force is the dynamic that I characterize as I'm going to fucking well show you. You tell me it can't be done, I'm going to fucking well show you. You put a barrier in my path, I'm going to fucking well show you. Honestly, I am driven by sheer rage at the obstacles I've encountered that white men building completely mediocre businesses that have the word AI in them don't, because they get lavished with hundreds of millions of dollars all the bloody time. And so I'm determined I'm going to fucking well show you.
I really love that. Oh, okay. A lot is happening in my head at the moment. I'm thinking for people who are listening to this, who are not philanthropies, who are not investors, who want to support, who want to make a contribution beyond just, signing up and, enjoying these videos, what can we do?
So first of all, please go to makelovenotporn.com, sign up and subscribe. Our subscriptions start at $10 a month, so it's very affordable. And, the best thing you can do to support me is, first of all, absolutely subscribe to Make Love Not Porn. And secondly, please go to makelovenotporn.academy, which we have just taken live under the radar. This is an idea I had 10 years ago because parents and teachers were begging me for it. 10 years is how long investors refuse to fund it. Even though it's educational, it's completely safe work, it's 100% human curated, like Make Love Not Porn. But I raised a small amount of equity crowdfunding last year so we could design and build it. It is the 0 to 18 and beyond sex education extension of what we do. We are bringing together the best of the world sex education content, making it easily accessible, searchable, findable. It's free to access for everybody, but we have a membership program. We can join as a member to support us. It's just $50 to $100 a year. You'll get our monthly newsletter, access to events, the ability to input. And so the two things that will enormously help me and my team are subscribing to Make Love Not Porn, becoming a member of Make Love Not Porn Academy. Also, we would love you to consider becoming Make Love Not Porn stars. Consider sharing your real world sex on Make Love Not Porn. Basically, we have a revenue share model. You get 50% of all rentals of your videos. You can be totally anonymous, wear masks, faces in shadow, and the moment you don't want your videos up anymore, we take them down. So, it's a very, no risk venture. Fourthly, I would say, please just spread the word about us. Tell everyone, precisely because we have so many challenges getting the word out. The best thing you can do for us is recommend us to everybody. Recommend Make Love Not Porn to all adults, recommend Make Love Porn Academy to parents, teachers, young people. That would really, really help us.
Thanks for sharing. Is there a function for donating as well?
Absolutely. So we have a non-profit vehicle. We have partnered with a non-profit called Inspire Access, who was set up just a couple of years ago by a mother-daughter team to be able to take donor-advised funds, philanthropic capital, foundation grants, family office funds, and channel them to underrepresented founders with for-profit social impact ventures who struggle to raise funding, like me. So, on Make Love Not Porn and on Make Love Not Porn Academy, we have a link to where you can actually make tax-deductible donations.
Right. So, Cindy, I want to do a fire round. If you could speak to your younger self, what would you say to her?
That's very easy. I would say start working for yourself sooner. Because I'm 66. I will be 66 on Sunday. That's my birthday, on February 1. And, my generation was not even, we never even heard the word entrepreneur. It was, you go to a good university, get a good degree, get a good job. And honestly, working for yourself is the only way to be. So I would say to my younger self, start working for yourself sooner.
That's great advice. My next question for you is, what was there a point where you thought, I am not performing, I am performing leadership, I need to be more myself? Perhaps when you were in advertising, was there any point in your life where you thought, because I see you sound like somebody who's just always had your shit together your entire lives? Yeah. So just curious about, was there a point where you noticed a shift, or was it something that just happened organically over time and with age?
I mean, it's just entirely organic. Honestly, it comes with getting older and not giving a damn what anybody thinks.
What did you value before that you no longer value now?
I think what I would say in answer to that is the mistake a lot of people make, it's a mistake I made when I first became an entrepreneur and founder, is thinking that networking and other people is how you achieve your goals. And I realized very quickly that the only person who can make things happen for you is you. And that's especially because in the course of building Make Love Not Porn, and I had another startup before that, If We Ran the World, which had to back burner when Make Love Porn blew up. But I've realized the huge distinction between people who say and people who do. There are lots of lovely people who say they want to help you and don't. The people who say they want to help you and do is a much, much smaller number. Obviously, at some level, it is about connections. You're very lucky if you can find the door openers and the supporters and the champions. But, I no longer value making those connections, meeting people. I'm now much more pragmatic. The only person who can make things happen for you is you. And if you find someone who actively helps, that's a bonus. But rely on yourself.
I love that. I think it does help manage expectation, and I think it also minimizes disappointment. And I am also of that belief. You do for yourself and things will come. And if they don't, you create it.
Yeah, exactly.
What would you say is your leadership style?
I've been asked a number of times over the years my definition of leadership. And it's very simple. I always make the same answer. Leadership is putting your people ahead of yourself. And that's my leadership style.
Okay. What are you reading right now? Or what book has impacted you significantly through life?
Honestly, I'm a voracious reader, and I read so many books that I really can't narrow, the answer down to one book. I love reading. I would always rather read than watch, listen, anything like that. So, all I would say in answer to that is that, because I know that reading is going down, I really encourage people to read. When you read, you get completely lost in the world of the book. And by the way, I'm a big fiction reader. I like escaping from reality into the world of fiction. So I would just say I really encourage everyone listening to read more.
Thanks for sharing that. I have a question, Cindy, around how are you reflecting on AI now, especially in connection to your work and to your platform?
So I wrote an op-ed for Fast Company a couple of years ago called 3 Reasons Why the Future of AI Relies on Women. I encourage our listeners to go to that op-ed. And again, I'll send you the link, Chisom, so that you can share it. And, the brief answer to that is the solution to everything, and this is true generally, but also in AI, the solution to every problem is fund female founders. Only 1.7% of all venture capital last year went to female founders. Even less went to female AI founders. That means that 98.3% of everybody's lived experience through technology and AI is through the male lens, where the default setting is male. That is a very bad thing. So my stance very simply is fund female founders and fund female AI founders.
I love that. That's specific, it's actionable, straight to the point. Okay, I have a final question for you. Today we've touched on identity clarity. I think you started by sharing, even why you chose your tagline, right? I blow shit up. And it seems, of course, that you know who you are. You don't shapeshift or you don't bend to systems that want you to otherwise shift. For someone who's listening to this, who's tired of performing, who's exhausted, but you're not quite sure what it means to start acting in courage, because I think, seeing you, how you show up in the world, at least a lot of us experience it as courageous. What would you say to them in what they need to do to start living courageously and authentically?
It's very simple. If you've never done this before, take a long, hard look inside yourself and identify what you stand for, what you believe in, what you value, what you're all about. Because doing that makes life so much simpler. Life still throws you all the shit it always will, but you know exactly how to respond to that shit in any given situation in a way that is true to you. And that is the secret of happiness. Living your life and working your work in a way that you know is always true to your own values.
From your experience, because you're a very visible public person, how do you navigate the pushback that comes from that?
You don't give a damn what other people think. When you know you're always living and working your values, you don't care what anybody else thinks, because all that matters is that you're true to yourself.
I love that. Thank you so much for sharing, Cindy. Thanks for being here. I feel like a whole new world has opened for me, and I need to go tell everybody I know about it.
Excellent.
Yeah, thank you for your wisdom. Thank you for your work. And I hope more of us know about it, because I think it's important. I'm not just even thinking about it from the context of Europe. I'm thinking in Africa as well, which is a massive market.
Oh my God, Chisom, I am desperate to make inroads in Africa. I've actually spoken in South Africa several times over the years. South Africa obviously has a real issue with rape culture. I want African investors, African partners. So yes, I would love that. I want to spread make African love, not porn.
I think there's opportunity there as well, because Nigerians and Ghanaians and South Africans and Zimbabweans, they are watching porn. They're watching it online.
Yep.
It would be nice if they access the right information.
Yep. No, exactly. And by the way, Chisom, I just want to share something that you and your listeners may find interesting. One of my agendas with Make Love Not Porn is I want to help countries reclaim their national sexual identity, because every country has one. National heritage, traditions, stereotypes exist as much around sex as other forms of national behavior like cooking or eating. It's just we never talk about it. But anyone who has ever loved their way around the world, guilty, can testify people make love differently based on the culture, society, country they come from, or rather they used to. Porn is now homogenizing sex globally. And so we put the call out from Make Love Not Porn. Make Nigerian love, not porn. Make French love, not porn. Make Chinese love, not porn. We want to raise this at a national level. We want countries to take pride in how they have real world sex, how they make love. Wouldn't mind instilling a sense of national competition as well. Prove which country is the greatest lovers, seriously. So yes, I would love to find African partners and investors.
Because the reality is, if you think we don't talk about sex in Europe and the US, in a lot of African countries, you do not talk about sex. It's just that thing that happens indoors. You don't even talk to your girlfriends or your sisters or your mom, for example, about sex. And I think for me, it's so important to change that, because oftentimes there's also this shame culture where something happens, a woman is sexually assaulted, and she carries that shame for such a long time. She can't even say anything. And if she does, she is shamed. And I think for me, that would be something I really want to topple, No,
absolutely, Chisom, because, Make Love Not Porn is a shame changer. We exist to take the shame, guilt, and embarrassment out of sex. We're bringing sex out of the shadows into the sunlight. We are spearheading what we call the social sex revolution. The revolution part is not the sex. It's the fact we're finally making it social. So yeah, absolutely.
I love this. Okay, I'm excited. For all that can come. Thank you so much for this. Thank you for taking the time. I really appreciate you.
Absolute pleasure.
Thanks for listening to Overnight Wisdom. Here's your one takeaway. Notice this week when you're performing instead of leading, when you're shape-shifting instead of being authentic. That awareness is where identity clarity begins. New episodes every Wednesday. Subscribe, and if this resonated, share it with someone who needs to hear it. I'm Chisom. Thank you for being here.